Unpluggered is a podcast talking all things St Kilda and brought to you by the wonderful crew at Marbled Meats in East Bentley. You can find them at 291 Chesterfield Road, Bentley East. And a reminder that you can order online with our promo code PLUGGER for 10% off your order and free delivery on any order over $80. Now enjoy our latest episode.
Was almost taken by Van der Beer, but not enough as Long picks it up for the Saints, kicks it up to the wing position. Geary, the captain, over the top. Look at them gone, they're gone. Butler's on. King all alone. And if he turns around, there's another one on. Butler's run all the way, and he gets it on the goal line and kicks the goal. Bang! What a reply. Great football by St Kilda.
Well, welcome to another edition of Unpluggered, a successful edition this week on the back of a 39-point win over the Western Bulldogs upon resumption. We entered the lockdown a little bit flat after the frustrations of round one and the fade out against North Melbourne, and maybe a little bit unsure as to how the group would come out of it, and they came out of it very well. It was a dicey first 15 minutes as the Bulldogs' pressure was pretty good, but we put them to the sword after that, and it was a really impressive performance built on the back of a lot of run and dash and accurate kicking inside 50 as well, which has not always been a feature of the Saints. 14-4-88 to 7-7-49. Jack Billings with 3 and Max King, again, a couple of goals and pretty exciting. And basically all of the new recruits, Butler, Jones, Ryder, etc., all having a really significant impact on the game. Darren Parkin is my name. We'll be joined by Aussie Jones a little bit later on, one of our favourites. I think most people at Barrack for the Saints had him as a favourite during the 90s, early 2000s, based on the way he played. But starting off with you, Aaron, it was a pleasing day. Obviously, we're watching it in different corners of the world rather than at Marvel Stadium, but a really good victory to kickstart the season.
Yes, much better return to form. As we said, we went into the game thinking, okay, we're half a chance here, and started off a bit. We kicked the first goal and thinking, okay, good start. But yeah, then they turned it around a little bit and thinking, oh, here we go. This is not looking too good. But after that first half of the first quarter, we just switched on, and that was the end of it. We put a gap between them and left them behind. It's really good to come out of the time off, and for all our new players, as you're mentioning, just to click the way they did. That's what I think we're most concerned about, whether the new players were all going to gel quick enough or not.
And Nick, we may have lost Jaron Geary, but script-wise, that went about as well as we could have hoped.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny. We spoke a while ago about having the depth in the defensive part of the ground that we hadn't really seen before, and I think there's a number of players that can come in this week to replace Gears. Obviously, really highly respected part of the team as the captain, and his work ethic and the way that he marshals the troops, I think will be difficult to replace. But there's a couple of guys knocking on the door to come and take that spot. It might end up being difficult for him to come back in if guys like a Webster or a Battle come in. Robertson, I know, he was on the cusp in round one, but seemingly might have gone a bit backwards over the break. But it's going to be really interesting to see how this team lines up in round three, because there's a couple of questions, and the main one is who do you take out if there's going to be people to come in, because that was a really solid team effort in round two.
Yeah, I mean the Dunstan omission ended up working. I'm a guy that thinks that he's underrated. I think he's probably in our best 22, but it's horses for courses, and obviously they went with a little bit more speed, and we saw the smaller forwards in Butler and Loney and have a really good day. The outside type midfielders like Zach Jones that you can win his own footy, and Billings that give you a bit of speed and run, complemented by the inside players of Steele and Ross and Hanbury that all had a really good impact. So they picked a well-balanced team. We'll talk about it a bit later on, but Collingwood by nature aren't all that tall in front of the footy. So forward line, they're a little bit shorter, and whether that means that you have to rest Howard or Carlisle and play a smaller defender so that you end up with Wilkie and one of those guys as a key tall. But that'll be really interesting. But it was just good to see them play a really aggressive, fast brand of football, and that's the type of footy that I think can trouble a team like Collingwood if we can execute it.
What was really impressive, I thought, was, we talk about the recruits and how well they fit in round two, but we haven't seen the best of Brad Hill yet either, and he was kind of the most heralded recruit of all, probably across the whole AFL, to be honest, over the last off season. And he's still got a lot more to show, and I think he will over time. But if we can play as direct footy, attractive footy, move the ball really quickly and smoothly without him having a massive impact.
Yeah, it's an interesting one in regards to Hill. So he's had 12 possessions in the first game, 11 in the first half, and only 1 in the second, and then 19 in this game. 19 possessions is a solid contribution in a shortened match. It's the equivalent of maybe 24 or 25. But yeah, certainly he would have had Jones, Hanbury, Billings, Ross and Steele, probably all those midfielders that were ahead of him in terms of the game. So
Clark.
Yeah, Clark, another one whose ball use was phenomenal. There was that passage of play where he had one pass inside on the right and then another pass inside on the left in the same exchange. So that was encouraging. And the Marshall Ryder thing worked really well. We had 49 hit-outs to 11. Ryder didn't get a lot of the ball, but was just putting it down the throat of the mids. And Marshall did what you want him to do. He went forward and took a mark and kicked a long set shot goal at an important stage of the game.
I was about to say he's almost going on 33, but how exciting was Ryder coming in? It almost felt like we had a new kid who had come through the junior ranks and all of a sudden just taken the game by storm. It just completely changed the way we play the game. We're getting first use. We're getting to knowing where he's going to tap it. We're getting there first to it. Ryder just knows what's happening out there, and he's able to deliver basically what he's telling his midfielders. Look, I'm going to put the ball here. That's where you run, and he gets it to him. It's amazing to have that difference when we haven't seen a tap ruckman like that for a number of years now.
It almost looked like the midfielders didn't know what to do in that situation, especially in that first quarter and early part of the second quarter, where they weren't used to getting first use. They weren't used to having hands on the ball off a contested ruck opportunity, and it was like silver service. It was incredible to watch the way that he just dominated Tim English and some of those other smaller ruckmen in some of those contests.
Cal Wilkie, good on Josh Bruce, obviously. And again, it continues the trend of I can't remember Cal Wilkie being beaten or having a bad day. And saw a few people talking about it on social media. You start to think, what was it that stopped him getting drafted? So many drafts he got overlooked in and recruited at 24 or whatever he was. And I just wonder what it was that all recruiters, including our own club on previous occasions, saw in him that led to him not being drafted, because he's as comfortable as anyone at the level.
You find there's probably a lot of players who are just on that point that they haven't been picked, but if they get their opportunity, they would absolutely take it. And you get a player who just slides into a team and he makes it look like he's been there forever and plays every single game and doesn't miss a beat. It's just, taking an opportunity on a player like that, and quite often it won't pay off, but this has paid off hugely. He's probably our most consistent player in the team.
Yeah,
and what a luxury!
Yeah,
the fact that last year especially, you lose Robertson again at the start of the season for the whole year. Carlisle's out for most of the year, and then this kid who's not even a kid really, but who's an accountant. 4 months earlier, was working in an office. He just slots in, and he, like you said, he just doesn't seem to get beaten. Doesn't matter if he's playing as a loose man in defence, if he's playing one-on-one, if he's in contest, he just doesn't get beaten. It's incredible.
It's the new Max Hudson.
Yeah, he's the one guy that when they pick the side, you're like, well, I don't even worry about Cal Wilkie. It's like he'll play on someone and beat him, and you don't even think about matchups or sort of how he'll go. It's just like, well, we assume that job will just get done. But on those best players, and obviously we'll sink our teeth into changes a little bit later on, votes were sort of pretty hard to come by. Obviously, we'll accumulate our votes out of round one. We've got them somewhere, but obviously on the back of isolation, football was shut down that particular day. We're sort of pulling all of those votes out of the North Melbourne game, but the best players were probably similar. But might start off with you, Nick, if you want to go through your 3, 2, and 1 out of the victory.
Yeah, I really liked Dan Butler's game. I thought his pressure in the forward half was the best on the field. The way that he chased, the way that he hit the ball. There was one, I think it was late in the third quarter, where he hit a pack, crumbed off the hands, and then delivered to the goal square, almost in a single move. And I really, really enjoyed his game. 2 votes to Zach Jones. It was really hard to split Zach Jones and Jack Billings. I thought were the 2 best players on the ground. But it's tough. There were a couple of guys that I thought were tough to miss out. I thought Hunter Clark was stiff to miss out on votes as well. But yeah, Jones and Billings were phenomenal with the ball and without, I thought as well.
I've pretty much go exactly the same way. Billings, clear best on ground. So as we saw, made numerous teams of the week. Then you had Jones slide into a couple himself as well. He gave us the run, gave us the disposal. The thing that we were actually a little bit worried about him with his usage of the ball. We knew he had the speed, but his finishing was just as good. And then, Butler, he scouted the pack. His pressure inside the 50. The tackling, just this working with all the other players that have been there for a while, sliding in and just making the forward line look like a fortress to get out of.
Yeah, I'm going to make it a hat-trick, exactly the same votes. So Billings, 3 votes, 24 possessions and 3 goals. Zach Jones, 2 votes, and he had 29. And we had an interesting talkback caller on Sunday night on SEN saying they were at the drive-in watching the game at Dramana, and they were honking their horn every time St Kilda kicked a goal, and then they changed it in the second quarter to honking the horn every time Zach Jones got a possession, and they joked that their car broke down as a result of the amount of times they had to use the horn. And Dan Butler gets the 1 vote. I read the stat that tackles inside 50 in the competition this year, St Kilda have had 50. The team that's had the second most is Port Adelaide with 34, so we're a fair way ahead. And Dan Butler's had 10 of the 50 across the 2 weeks for the Saints. So 3 Billings, 2 Jones, 1 Butler. Could easily have given a vote to Ryder, could have given a vote to Steele, could have given a vote to Seb Ross,
Clark.
Yeah, any of those. Cal Wilkie obviously could have got a vote as well. We almost forget about Cal, and you almost don't even calculate him in for votes, but you probably should. So yeah, they were all in the mix. So that was really encouraging. But a man who you couldn't really forget when he was playing footy is going to be our next guest. Many memorable highlights. If he didn't practice, I saw this on Twitter a little while ago, if he didn't practice Aussie Jones goals at training, running goals from 50 metres, then he probably didn't like footy that much. So he's our next guest on the program.
8 possessions. He averages 29 over the past 3 seasons against the Crows. Harvey out wide. Jones is running.
And that's danger for the Crows. Costa and Bachut. Jones the length of the ground nearly. 60 out. Will he take the ball on? Handball inside to Thompson. A fumble. Back. Aussie Jones goes to the left. Kicks it and gets it. What a goal.
Well, it is our pleasure to catch up with one of the great blokes in footy and one of the most exciting players to represent the Saints for quite some time. I think we all remember the runs down the wing at Waverley Park, and then obviously the move to halfback and the influence at Marvel Stadium, or Telstra Dome as it was at the time, and one of the greatest goals we've ever seen in a grand final, obviously back in 97. I speak of Aussie Jones. And Oz, nice to catch up with you again, mate.
Yeah, good day, gents. Thanks for having me tonight.
Now, those early days, sort of when you grew up not all that far away, like a Victorian boy coming to the Saints at an interesting time. Tony Lockett had just left the club. A lot of you young guys sort of came in as a result of some of those picks that were acquired. And what was the St Kilda like that you found when you arrived under Stan Ells?
Yeah, certainly different times. We were at a pretty rundown Moorabbin at the time. I think it's pretty famous that the change rooms. I mean, the whole place, to be honest. The reception, the social club was all pretty ordinary. We had a weights room that had rotten floorboards and all that sort of stuff. So probably a fair bit different to what the boys experience now. Not only at Moorabbin, but down at Seaford when they moved down there with sort of first class facilities all round. So they deserve to get spoiled, but we certainly walked into something a little bit different back then. But it was exciting because the club had sort of made a pretty big effort to go down a different path. Obviously they played finals early 90s on the back of a few older recruits. And just in 94, the draft of 94, they obviously went with me, Joel, Brownie, Dad with Lappo and the Wakelands and a few other guys. And we started to build a pretty young core group.
Aussie, before that 94 draft, and obviously it was a pretty good draft for us, but you spent time with the Collingwood reserves, is that right? And Melbourne as well. What happened with those clubs?
Yeah, so back in my day when I was playing in the TAC Cup, now the NAB Cup, the lists were quite small, I think. And when the AFL clubs got injuries, they used to call up the under-18s kids to fill in. So I played a game for Collingwood, and I was at the Dandenong Stingrays at the time. They got a call from Collingwood never to send me back. They thought I was a bit slight and a bit fragile and all those sort of things. So I was pretty confident Collingwood weren't going to draft me. And then I actually did the same with Melbourne. When I was with the Stingrays, we went down to Cardinia Park and played the Geelong Falcons under-18s. They beat us by about 30 goals. The following weekend, I played for Melbourne's twos against Geelong's twos, and they beat us by 30 goals. So back-to-back 30-goal thumpings down at Cardinia Park. And I remember Rod Grinter was running around the twos, and he's, to this day, he's probably the biggest spray I've ever copped from a teammate. And I was an under-18 filling in for Melbourne, and he absolutely ripped me. I got another letter. The Dandenong Stingrays got another letter from Melbourne saying, "Don't send this kid back to us again." So there was two clubs where I knew I wasn't going when the draft day came around.
So you get drafted eventually by St Kilda, and then your first game you end up going over to Perth to play. It's a bit of a daunting debut, I guess. I mean, you'd played a couple of the pre-season matches before that. But how's Perth as a first up?
Yeah, it was pretty daunting. Absolutely spot on. West Coast were reigning premiers as well. First game, I actually started in a forward pocket, and I'm sort of walking from our huddle for the start of the game, and John Worsfold comes over to me. He's the reigning premiership captain, known for his hardness and all that sort of stuff. And I'm in for a pretty tough day here, but he actually come up, shook my hand, wished me all the best. Well and truly beat me on the day, but more just didn't let me near the footy. He certainly didn't pick on me. Which I thought he was going to do. I thought he was going to just brutalise me and punch the crap out of me. But he actually just beat me because he was more physically stronger, mentally stronger, reigning premiership captain. I just think he knew he had me beat right from the first bounce. But to this day, I remember the game and how respectful and positive John Worsfold was. And even now, I've got letters from John when I played my milestone games. At times, he was an opponent of mine, then coach of West Coast, wishing me all the best in the future, and also congratulating me on the career I'd had to date. So, sign of a true gentleman.
Absolutely. Now, there were some good signs from St Kilda pretty quickly in that pre-season of 95. We beat Carlton at Waverley in a ripper of a game. You kicked 3. Joel Smith kicked the winner. We came from about 40 points down. Won the pre-season the following year in 96, but just couldn't quite get it together until we recovered from 1-4 in 97. Can you sort of take us back to that moment? You had a brilliant year in 97, but from 1-4 to launch into a grand final, can you pinpoint a particular turning point?
Yeah, I can. Absolutely. I think anyone from the club at the time will sort of highlight that after the 1-4, we went upstairs into a meeting room that we had in Moorabbin. And anytime you went upstairs, you sort of risked your life. Like I said, the whole joint was about to fall down. So we all sat there and we sort of looked at each other in the eyes. Stan Alves ran the session and basically said, "This is where it's at. We've got a squad together that needs to be better. We highlighted a few things. We changed a few training habits." Stan basically got up in front and said, if I'm not the right man, let me know. And he got 100% support from the group. We had great leaders, Berkey Halves, Lowy, even Nicky Winmar's probably doesn't get mentioned so much for the leadership, but was huge mentor for me in my playing days. And from then we sort of really did turn it on, to I think we won 15 of the next 16, something like that. It's sort of unheard of. And then, from the Saints Footy Club leading into that time, I don't think they'd done that too often in their entire history. So that was huge. It was a roller coaster. It was good to be part on. And, obviously the end result, which we'll probably get to, didn't go our way. It sort of felt for that period of time, we felt invincible and we could beat anyone.
Aussie, did you see that period coming?
No, not to that level. You guys have sort of mentioned already that we had Smitty, Brownie, Lapo that sort of complemented the stars that we had going around. There was probably some unheralded guys too. The Wakelands were sort of holding down key positions down back. Matty Lappin had a huge year as well. So we didn't see that coming, but because we did have, I won't say arrogance, but a little bit of confidence in amongst the younger guys that the club brought in. We sort of rode it a little bit, and as much as we didn't see it coming, once it was happening, there was no real disbelief. It was sort of like, yep, we're up to this, we're good enough, let's ride it out.
So speaking of, as you say, we're going to move into grand final. I mean, we do remember one moment basically that happened in that game. Let's actually take you to that point where you've received the kick from halves on the back flank, right on, looking up the wing. What are you looking at ahead of you? What are you thinking? Are you actually thinking, I'm off here, or was there an option that you thought I should hit that option, or where did it take you?
Yeah, you can probably see a couple of times. It's actually really, you can sort of clearly see that at times I did look to sort of give it off. So it wasn't my plan from halfback to kick the goal, but I'll go back a little bit. It was actually a set play. The kick was to go to Robert Harvey, on that 45, about 15 out, and then try and get outside the zone to me to try and use my pace and run. So quite amazing that something like that comes off at that level, but it was strong. Early on in the run, I actually looked to give to Brett Cook, and then I think, no, I'll just let him smash Kim Costa here. I'll just let him do all the dirty work, and I'll just stay on the outside and run and get a hot dog from the grandstand while I'm going past. And then again, I actually look to kick the ball inside 50, and I do that weird bounce thing where I sort of go to kick it but drop the ball and it comes back to me, and then I'm basically just confused. I handball to Tomo and think I'm done, and he sort of fumbles it, mainly because it was a shit handball, and then I get it back and manage to slot it. So yeah, my family's basically say to me, obviously winning would have been the premiership medallion, but if we had won, that'd be on every grand final Channel 7 moment for the rest of our lives. But it gets sort of pushed away. But I'd rather missed, and it changed the course of the game, and we won. But it's a nice memory, and I'm coaching Bunyip out here in Gippsland now, and every time the boys have a few beers, they YouTube it and show me just to piss me off.
Probably increases to about 14 bounces by the time the
that's right. Once I've had a few, it does.
Post, obviously 97, we're in front at halftime in the grand final. It's pretty close to obviously winning a flag. In 98, we're 11-3 and on top of the ladder. Things are going pretty well. Within about 8 or 9 weeks, we've got a new coach and we're on track to win a wooden spoon within 2 years. I guess we spoke about how quickly it rose. Can you pinpoint why it dropped so quickly?
I can't. I've been asked this a lot, and thought about it a lot, especially because in the rooms in 97, it was after the grand final. It was really, really emotional, and I actually got criticised a little bit from a couple of players that I didn't show that emotion. It was probably because I was 20. I could look around the room and think, we've got something here. I was obviously as disappointed as anyone, but probably. Some of the older boys were really visibly emotional, and I probably didn't get to that point because I thought that's okay. We're going to have a run of a few finals appearances and all that sort of stuff. And as you said, we sort of dropped off just as quick as we went up. So I can't pinpoint it. Obviously in 97, Joel does his knee. He ends up going to Hawthorn for probably a little bit of security options, and I'm not sure he was treated the best by the Saints. There was a few things like that. Spider ends up ducking off. Some of our absolute superstars are now 2, 3, 4 years older, and probably the depth through the young guys probably didn't match these older guys. Not so much getting to the end of their career because the stars that I mentioned probably played for another 3 or 4 years, but we just probably didn't get that depth through the list to be able to sustain it. And as you said, it dropped off pretty quick. 98 finals appearance, but never really looked damaging. And then 99, 2000, 01 were pretty ordinary.
Aussie, after that 98 season of disappointment, I guess ultimately, Stan Alves was moved on, and there's been accusations, I guess, for 15, 20 years about what happened there, and people talk about the players were involved in that, and there was talks of mutiny and all that sort of stuff. Can you give us a bit of insight into what the locker room was like around that time?
Yeah, it was probably it was a little bit awkward at the time. I wasn't involved in much of that sort of stuff. Again, we sort of touched on it earlier. My outlook on footy was playing the game, getting yourself right, enjoying it, and representing the club to the best of their ability. I sort of didn't deal with much of the back house. It was sort of part of it that didn't really interest me. And I get asked about coaches a lot, and I was really surprised that Alvesy got the flick. I wasn't surprised when Tim Watson was moved on because it was actually his call. He sort of come to us with 6 or 7 rounds to go in the season when he was gone. When Blighty got the flick, I was surprised but didn't see it coming, didn't look into it too much. So it was an awkward place to be. It was more awkward for the short time after when, Stan Alves was still the biggest influence in my career. He was huge in sort of taking the club down the youth path, and then actually having the confidence in 95 and 96 to play us. Probably ahead of our time a little bit, but obviously the result 97 showed that it was worth it. So huge surprise, strange place to be. Then we sort of talk about why did things drop off. Probably the instability with the coaching staff and all those sort of things certainly don't help any footy club, do they? The really strong clubs that have sustained success don't do it.
So we talk about, you brought in, talk about Timmy Watson, talk about Blight, talk about Dan Grant Thomas, all very, very different coaches. Is there something you were able to take then from one coach and the next coach and the next coach there and just sort of go, okay, and that's kind of where the point you got to in 05 where you played a different game and you changed kind of how you played the game? And was there anything that you brought from all of them in any sort of way at all?
They're all very, very different. Obviously, Stan probably a little bit old school. We trained in a certain way, but nothing like the clubs do now. Tim was a strange one. He didn't have any apprenticeship, but had done some time in the media. I was actually an Essendon supporter growing up and had number 32 on my back, so I was pretty excited for the first little bit. That didn't turn out all that well. I wouldn't know how Blighty coaches. He wasn't there long enough and didn't turn up enough. And probably, as much as I say Alvesy was the biggest influence, I'd probably coach myself more like Grant, with the man management sort of stuff. I'd sort of pride myself on the guys that I coach each week are in a frame of mind to deliver their best. But probably similar to Grant as well. Not brilliant tactically, myself. So I sort of feel with Grant, he had an amazing footy brain next to him in the box in Matt Rendell. But I don't know if Bundy got enough say. I don't know. I didn't sit in the box a lot, but I sort of took a little bit from Alves and a little bit from Tomo, and Tim and Blighty were there for short times.
Grant Thomas seems to be the type of coach that would maybe suit the way you play. He was big on players playing on instinct and the natural style of the game and being perhaps maybe more offensively minded. You're a player that, take the game on, run, carry, a lot of pace and long goals and those sorts of things. Do you sometimes feel now, looking at the AFL from the outside, that maybe tactically the game almost takes that out of people a little bit, and there's still room for allowing players to be themselves and play with flair, and maybe you get that a little bit more coaching at a local level?
Yeah. So before I get into like what I think of the current day footy, Parker, I think you just called me a loose, unaccountable halfback flanker and reading between the lines. So thanks for that, mate. But
A very good one at that. So.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks. Yeah, good cover. Well, yeah, well backed up. You can sort of see they play like robots. You know, they defend like robots. They defend as teams and all that sort of stuff. It works. It's the modern game. I love watching it. You know, it's quick. The skill levels really high. You know, someone like Milne that didn't finish all that long ago. Imagine taking the instinct out of his game. You know, he kicked over 600 goals at whatever 2.2 a game. You know, if he hasn't got instinct, he hasn't got a heap. But his instinct was everything he had. You know, no one could tackle him. He could turn blokes inside out. So I think there's a space to get the balance right. You know, and I reckon maybe the last couple of years they've probably gone back to allowing a little bit of freedom in players' games. And when I say, you know, a little bit of freedom, it still has to stick within certain parameters. You know, and Richmond have got it. You know, you can see Dusty at times where he'll just slide forward when he thinks, you know, he's going to have an opponent that he's going to beat one-on-one. You know, at the other end, Basher Hooley seems to run with a fair bit of freedom because they're so confident in his decision-making ability and their ability to run the footy as a team and defend as a team. So I'd love to see more freedom. Of course I would, because that's how I played. But I can understand the modern coaches and the success they get on, you know, this full team structure and all that sort of stuff. But I reckon there's a place for a bit of balance.
Off the back of that comment, how do you reckon you would have gone if you'd stuck around for a few more years and played under Ross in that kind of 07, 8, 9, 10 period, if it lasted that long, obviously. But you know, that was a pretty rigid, really structured kind of game style. How do you reckon you would have gone in that kind of period?
Well, I retired at the end of 05 because footy was getting too serious and there was meetings about meetings. So how do you reckon I would have gone? I would have walked out of meetings on Monday morning because we used to have meetings. This is 05. We used to have meetings on Monday morning to set up our meetings for the week. And I'm like, are you serious? Can we just get those red and yellow things out and kick them around? So, mate, I would have been shithouse, and not because I couldn't have played under Ross Lyon. From all reports, all the players who played under him absolutely loved him, but it wouldn't have suited me, mate, not one little bit.
Now, a bit of a contrasting moment between two matches that you've played in. Now, we had the 96 preseason grand final where siren went, crowd went nuts, crowd's absolutely packed with supporters, old fella climbing the point post, celebrating like we'd actually won a premiership, to then move on to 2004 where we basically went, nope, that's nothing, it doesn't matter. So just the contrasting moment. How's the difference in the feeling of those two?
Yeah, very, very different. But even for us, you sort of talk about the supporters. The supporters probably enjoyed 04 more than us. You know, I enjoyed 96, and then, you know, there's obviously a pretty famous photo of Tomo and Lenny with that weird wizard trophy looking like their cat had died. You know, it was just horrible. You know, we didn't have a lot of success. We've just taken home a trophy that the AFL felt was relevant enough to have a trophy, and poor old Lenny's got to get up there, who was probably a little bit excited inwardly and had to get up there and pretend he didn't care and all that sort of stuff. It was just a weird fielding, and you know, and that was sort of Tomo's outlook, that we were only chasing one sort of title and everything sort of on the way was irrelevant. Whereas, I mean, even the 97 grand final, prelim final, we had a little bit of it. You know, I actually finished on the bench in the 97 granny and prelim. And as soon as the siren went, I was really excited, ran on the ground, which players are, because you've just earned the opportunity playing at a granny. And a couple of senior players sort of brought it back a little bit. And I just thought they got the balance wrong at that time. You know, St Kilda Footy Club hasn't got a huge amount of success, and I reckon we should celebrate, you know, everything we get.
So you still had a couple of good years in you, and obviously 04, 05, we played prelim finals and you know, a kick or two away from grand final appearances again. Having been through that experience in 97, obviously, and 98 again, what was it like in those couple of years under GT, but being one of the more experienced guys? And what was the difference from that kind of 96, 97 era when you were one of the kids?
Yeah, it was, It was certainly different. I felt like the 04-05 sides had a lot more depth. Obviously, without sort of going back to 97 too much, we had quite a few key players out that really sort of probably hurt our chances. Whereas in 04-05, there was some actually really good players missing out in playing. So that depth was absolutely critical. And there's probably a little bit of luck, some decision making from the box and on the ground that probably hurt us in a couple of preliminary finals. Not being able to go on and get that another opportunity at a grand final. So you sort of talk about a lot of teams that can have a run where they might make one granny and win it. We were probably that side that had a really good list, really good momentum, positive feel within the club, but just sort of couldn't get past that prelim stage when I was coming to the end of my career.
Now, in 04, we had a pretty big win against reigning premiers in Brisbane. Generally, we see the key moment of Schwartz putting through the goal from outside the 50, but there was a bit of a key moment not long before that. How much did you miss that point by?
It wasn't heaps, but when you're 30 metres out pretty much straight in front with no pressure, to miss altogether, it doesn't matter how much by. I should have kicked the goal, much less not even scrape in for a point. But looking back, it actually worked out well because Schwartz went back and kicked the goal. By me missing, kept the ball up our half. It was all part of my plan, just to kick an absolute horrible kick. If I had to kick the goal, I would have gone back the middle and give Brizzy a chance to get over the top of it. So that all worked out well. He's a ripping fella, Troy Schwartz, but he'll be remembered for that kick. He did bugger all in his career anyway, so he'll be remembered for that forever.
Classic 7-point play. Now, I know you've got a meeting very shortly, but you're an All-Australian in 97, then you're an All-Australian again later in your career. And I know you went through some difficulty in that back end of the 90s, early 2000s. How much did it mean to you to, in a different role, climb the tree again and obviously get that recognition? And I guess the second part of that question, you retired relatively young, and I know you've spent a lot of time in country football as opposed to perhaps the Melbourne bubble. Was it a little bit motivated by that? I think you would have been, 29 when you gave it away?
Yeah, I actually turned 29 about a week after my last game. So I was 28 at the time. And, I sort of spoke about some of the younger guys probably didn't get to the level of our superstars, 99, 2000. And I was one of them. I don't shy away from it. My best footy come when I was motivated, enjoying the game. I had periods right throughout my whole career, and 99, 2000 was probably the low point where I struggled for the motivation to train at the level required of AFL footy. I had some great influences at the club. Robert Harvey, obviously recognised across our industry as perhaps the best trainer ever. But it was actually a guy called Andrew Thompson. You guys would know him, a club best and fairest winner, that really sort of drove me to get back to getting fit, getting motivated, playing the game. And it would have been about the end of 02, I think. It was draft trade deadline was 2:00. And I was on like a phone conference with Grant Thompson, Adrian Dodoro from Essendon and Kevin Sheedy. And Grant Thomas sort of came over the top and said, I've got a role for you. I'd love you to stay at the Saints. And, he moved me to half back, and I enjoyed a nice change in my career at different roles, always probably pretty handy at reading the play and kicking the footy. So it worked out well, and it's a nice way to finish off my career.
Looking at this year in a football sense, there's always been debates around, will the season have an asterisk against it? I mean, you're going through difficulties at a local level, as are most of us in sport, that the AFL can generally create a way to survive with bubbles and exemptions and travel restrictions and all of that sort of stuff. But how do you feel about, I guess, the way they're handling it now and the way this whole year looks from your point of view at the AFL? Are you comfortable that this season's going to be one where, in a sense, whoever wins the premiership, it's almost more difficult than it's ever been before, and there should certainly be no asterisks against the year?
I'd probably look at it a little bit different, Parker. I reckon there will be an asterisk, and depending on your outlook on footy will mean whether that asterisk is a positive or a negative. I think the AFL team that wins the premiership this year has done an amazing job to get their players and their club up and about. You talk about the asterisks, the whole world's got an asterisk, really, hasn't it, for 2020? If you've been able to handle this time positively, keep your group upbeat. You know, I love Damien Hardwick because he's really honest, and I saw an interview with him last week where he sort of spoke about how even in the first 2 or 3 weeks of lockdown, he didn't really handle it that well. Some of the players, Heath Shaw's another one. He said he's like a footy trip. You know, the first week of lockdown, he just went on a bender. You know, so the club, the coaches, the players that can manage this time in completely unprecedented times, environment. Personally, I reckon I'll have an asterisk, but it'll be an asterisk of well bloody done. Well done to get your club, your players, and your coaching staff through a tough time and win a flag. Are going to be a huge effort.
We saw you a month or so ago on a club video chat with Joel Smith and Brownie and those guys. How involved are you at a club level, you know, with the club these days? And was there a period, you know, kind of when you walked away that you're a little bit disillusioned with the club? And how did it kind of come about that you came back to do that video for the club?
Yeah, so I never really had much of an issue with the club. The biggest strain probably put on the club when Ross was coach. And like I said, I don't say anything negative about coach because all my teammates that played under Ross reckon he was an absolute genius. It was more the fact that the club locked down. You know, it was an absolute shutout of everyone. You know, you guys would have seen it, heard it, experienced. It wasn't just sort of the media, you know, the amount of closed training sessions where supporters weren't allowed to go. The access to past players was sort of taken away as well. And it wasn't so much the club. I understood where they were coming from, but a lot of the players, not so much disillusioned, but because we weren't actually welcomed back into the fold of the footy club, we just stopped trying, I suppose, and you know, stopped trying to go to the games and functions and all that sort of stuff. Whereas the last few years, probably on the back of Cowboy Neil initially and Justin Kazitsky, they've really started to engage the past players. The video chat you talk about had Tony Brown in it, who's the welfare manager down there, who I'm still great mates with. So it's probably just come about with a change of outlook, you know, making sure the past players that gave up, you know, a fair bit of their time and effort to represent the footy club are seen like that. So I've hosted a few supporter rooms for them in the last couple of years, and probably with the shutdown too, Nick, the club didn't have any content for their Facebook page, so they started to go on to us old pricks to tell some stories and all that sort of stuff, mate. So I'm telling you, as soon as the AFL season starts again, you won't hear of us again. So we just made the most while we're in the limelight there for a bit.
Yeah, speaking of the current day and all what's happening at the moment with the team and everything, at the moment we've got a small back pocket, great on the left, great on the right, kicker, basically by the name of Clark. How much have you seen about him? And has anyone said to you, hey, there's a little bit of Aussie Jones in this kid? Because the way he moves, the way he kicks the ball around, he is going to be a very good player. And a few people have mentioned they can see just a little bit of in there.
Yeah, I like Clark. I actually like the way the whole list is going. I'm not going to fake me way through this. I don't see anywhere near enough of the Saints as I'd hope. You know, I've got a couple of boys. One's playing junior footy, so you know I'm at his games all the time, coaching senior footy. Haven't got Foxtel at home, and bloody hell, the Saints are on a lot of Foxtel games. There's not much free to air going on. So, and I'm also, you know, in Gippsland, so I sort of don't get into watch them as much as I'd like. But you know what I see, I like. I think, you know, I'm not a genius to say this, but Max King's going to be someone we can build the side around. I think Jack Billings is going to be an A-grader if he's not already. You know, his form just continually stacks up, you know, sort of getting that between 20 and 30 possessions, but backing it up with 2 or 3 every week. Again, I'm not going to fake it or bullshit. I'm not sure we're ready to sort of challenge the very, very good sides, but I think the list is building to an area where we will shortly.
And just a final thought to squeeze one in, that the fact that you were such a good kick on both sides of the body, was that instinctive? Were you ambidextrous, I guess, as a youngster? Because you were probably one of the best. We look at Sam Mitchell and guys like that at using your left and your right.
Yeah, I am reasonably handy sort of in most sports on both sides, but it was actually the old man. You know, if I ever had a kick with a footy with the old bloke, he'd say, "You got to kick on the left," because he knew if I was mucking around with my mates or, you know, having a kick at training, it'd always be on the right, you know, so he knew I was doing enough on my preferred side. So anytime the old man dragged me out in the street or up the park, it was always on the left, and I bloody hated him at the time for it. I just wanted to kick some rippers from the boundary on the right. But, you know, when you get to TAC level and then AFL level, I just feel it makes you such a better player and harder to read, harder to catch, because, you know, I had the confidence to go on my left, and if you're trying to defend that, you know, you can shut down certain players because they're only going to kick on their left. So you go to that side, shut them down. If they end up kicking on their right, it's actually a positive of how you've defended them. So I saw it as a strength. I didn't mind going on the left. Not too many coaches sort of had a crack at me at times, and, you know, I'm still doing a lot with some junior footballers out in the bush now, and, you know, I'm pretty hard on them, getting them on the left, and I talk to them. You know, I say to them, it's going to make you twice as good a player. It's probably not, but that's the way I sort of try and influence the boys to get better on their other side.
Good luck with the Bulldogs at Bunyip, mate, and good luck with footy resuming. It'd be great to have your obviously your expertise in local footy for whatever this season looks like. Wish we could have an hour with you, mate. Hopefully we can do it again down the track.
Yeah, lock me in, guys. I've enjoyed it. You know, obviously we speak a bit, Parko. Footy's all over the shop at the moment. I'm coaching the under-12s out here at Bunyip, so I got home tonight. My wife works late. I've fed them. Now I've got a committee meeting to see where the hell footy and our club's going in the next 4 months. So pretty hectic, but wouldn't have it any other way. It's the greatest game in the world.
Certainly is, mate, and you made it pretty special as well. So good luck going forward.
Thanks, gents.
Also to our supporters, 44,000 members, you've been so loyal to us, and especially through this period, and to have roughly 1,200 people down at Dramana and supporting the Saints, and I reckon I could have actually heard a few cheers through the game, but no, it was a very, very good performance for the boys, and the bit was the difference between round one was our consistency in the game. You know, yep, the Bulldogs came at us, but our ability to absorb that and keep focus and not let it get to us. So, yeah, it was a really pleasing effort, and we've got some big challenges coming up with the Pies and the Tigers, but this was a bit of a shot of confidence for us, and yeah, it was a great night for the footy club. Thank you.
Unpluggered, thanks to the wonderful crew down at Marbled Meats, which is bringing that classic butcher back to the suburbs of East Bentley, which is, as we know, St Kilda heartland down in that part of the world. We turn our attention to Collingwood, so we knew that this fortnight represented a stiff challenge. We've got Collingwood and Richmond. They played a fairly ugly game against each other on Thursday night, but a lot of the reason why it was ugly is because they're both so good defensively and strong around the ball, and it's supposed to be a little bit wet on Saturday. We're playing at the MCG, so it's obviously different to the slick surface at Marvel Stadium. But the run in the open space should still suit us. We've got a few things that can trouble Collingwood. It's a good test for, say, a resting forward like Marshall and a kid like Max King to be able to try to penetrate against that Collingwood defence. But starting with you, Nick, how are you feeling about it? And obviously any potential changes. We know Geary is one out.
Yeah, look, it's a difficult one based on Collingwood's game, because I feel like both those teams, Collingwood and Richmond, almost played not to lose rather than playing to win. They didn't seem to take the game on much in the second half. There wasn't much to like about that game. It was really tough viewing. Whereas you contrast that with our game style on Sunday evening, and that was, you know, we played to win. We weren't looking to save things. We played hard. We ran hard. Really attractive, nice football to watch. So it's going to be really interesting to see if Collingwood bring that same style to the G on Saturday, and whether we can do the same thing as well. Collingwood obviously have one of the better midfields in the competition. They've been known for that, and the way that they move the ball over the last few years. So, you know, whether they bring that kind of game style back in round three is going to be one question, and if they do, whether we can cope with it on the defensive end. But secondly, whether we can make them pay when we have the ball, like we did with the Bulldogs. The lineup is also, like you said, the really interesting one, whether it's Webster that comes in for Geary, or whether they go a bit taller with Battle and bring him back to play a bit bit of that swingman role or what they do is going to be a really interesting call, because no one really plays the same way as Jaron Geary, and that's a really big loss, I think, for the way that our defence is structured and lines up. So that's going to be a really interesting one. I'm keen to see who they bring in, because I really thought that Josh Battle was coming in for round 2, and again was really surprised that he was left out again. So I'd love to see him in, but he's certainly not a like for like switch for Jaron Geary.
What will be interesting to see which way they do go, as Parker said, it's most likely going to be a bit wet on Saturday. So the ruck combo, that's going to be the other thing. Are we going to stick with the tall side? Are we going to have a look at perhaps taking out one ruckman and maybe just like a Battle coming back in, just that mid-sized player? It's going to be a completely different game, and on top of that, we don't really know what Collingwood are going to bring. As you say, it's their game is something we really can't look at and go, oh, this is how they're playing. It's just a game that had nothing in it, nothing to give us an idea of which way they're going, and so it's not something we can really gather ideas. Okay, this is the way the team has to be structured. So it's almost one we have to go out there and try to win ourselves, rather than trying to beat the way they play.
Yeah, it looks like
good
Collingwood,
call on the ruckman as well. I think just as we record this on Wednesday evening, there seems to be a bit of a question mark around Brodie Grundy as well, and whether he's going to play. So that's obviously a massive out for them. He's one of the top 3 or 4 players in the competition, and the outcome of that, whether he plays or not, might have a big bearing on who we play in the ruck.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, the theory is if he does play, obviously double teaming him is a reasonable way to go. And Marshall around the ground seems a better matchup, but Ryder's more likely to perhaps beat him in bounces and contests around the ground. So you're probably not going to beat Brodie Grundy. It's more whether you neutralise that matchup. And obviously, if he's not there, that's huge for us. But I think Battle has to play for a number of reasons, because one, he could play if they structure up small inside 50 instead of a tall. He could play potentially in the midfield as a taller option, but he could also potentially play a Jaron Geary role as a defensive forward on Jeremy Howe. So Jeremy Howe last week took 1,000 marks and was cutting off everything when Richmond went forward. I could see if Josh Battle could make him accountable and drag him away from the contest, because Jeremy Howe reads the play so well, then if you could work out your matchups where, say, Jack Steele plays on Pendlebury or somebody side bottom, somebody of that ilk, and then you get your rucks right, and then maybe you do a defensive role on Jeremy Howe, and you get your De Goey matchup right at the other end, which that's where it might be. Does Webster play in that if he hasn't played AFL for 2 years, or do you go with something a bit safer? Like, I mean, Dylan Robertson hasn't played much for 2 years either, so or Cal Wilkie could conceivably play on De Goey. Maybe that's the way they go, but they're probably the key matchups, and maybe run Sev Ross head-to-head against Taylor Adams, something like that.
It's something that I saw today from one of our listeners, Jordan. He posted up the team that we actually went in with Collingwood last year, and we have 8 players, most likely, who are going to play this week that played in that game. So we're going in with
in that game,
Yeah, and we're going with a completely different team. So I don't think theirs is going to be a lot different. I mean, they're going to have probably 15, 16, 17, same as last year. But we ran with them till 3/4 time, and then they blew us away.
Yeah, we should have been a fair way up too, not just with them at 3/4 time.
Yeah. But completely different team. It's going to be a completely different game to what we played against them last year. So we really don't know what this side could actually do.
So what's our gut feel on it? I mean, it's brave to obviously tip us, and probably until we know how we go in a matchup like this, but I'm really curious to see. I mean, I think if we are to have a really significant impact on the season, we've probably got to win one of these 2 games somehow, and then get ourselves in a bit of a roll, because it would be $1 to go to Perth for the hub, I would say, after the Carlton game, which is a tricky prospect, although everything's winnable if there's no one at games. So, I think it's important that we win one of these 2, and just by sheer value of the 2 sides, it feels like Collingwood are slightly more beatable than Richmond. So hopefully this is the one. And then obviously if you beat Collingwood, you then get a free hit at Richmond to double down the following week.
Not to mention the confidence that you gain from a result like that as well. To go into a game with Richmond having beaten Collingwood, that would be massive.
So what are we thinking?
Yeah,
Mate?
The weather's going to bring it back a little bit. I think if they are the better side of the day, the rain will shorten that gap a little bit. I mean,
it feels low
I
scoring.
can't say we're no
a bit
chance.
more used to it than we are, though.
It feels low scoring. Like you get the feeling it's 9 goals to 6 or something.
Yeah. So I mean, on a dry day, that's a 15-8 goal. Game.
Yeah, but Collingwood don't score a lot, but they don't concede a lot either, and it's dour and wet. So
So that's where we're going to need our smalls. That last week were all very good. It's going to be a bit sloppy if it is wet. It's going to be in and under. If we can get that first use again off Ryder if he plays and get off the back of the pack, get running, we can do the same thing again. We're definitely not completely out of the game. That's for sure. We are in with a chance.
Absolutely. No question about that whatsoever. Well, we look forward to that. It's Collingwood on Saturday. It's good to get back to talking about footy and not talking about necessarily possibilities. We're analysing a victory and hunting down rivals and big teams in the competition as we try to improve over the course of this season. Boys, wherever we're watching it this Saturday, hopefully we get the type of result and the type of performance that we got against the Bulldogs. But go Saints, and a few better sides to beat than Collingwood. So let's hope that it goes the right way.
One of the best feelings in footy is to walk away after a win against Collingwood.
This has been Unplugged, and a reminder that if you are a carnivore that lives in Melbourne and hasn't been to Marbled Meat, you are missing out. That's the type of feedback Marbled Meats receives from their customers. That review is currently on Google Reviews, so go on, get onto Google, type in Marbled Meats East Bentley, and you can see it all for yourself. Whether it's a porterhouse or pork belly, poultry or even pet treats you're after, Marbled Meats has you covered with all of that and more. Head into store at 291 Chesterfield Road, Bentley East. You can order online as well with our promo code PLUGGER, which will get you 10% off your order and free delivery on any order over $80 to a ton of locations around Melbourne and the Mornington Peninsula. So stock up your meat supply, marbledmeats.com.au, promo code PLUGGER for 10% off and free delivery. Bringing that classic butcher back to the suburbs of East Bentley, it's Marbled Meats.